He earned that Purple Heart bleeding in some far-off jungle, defending ideals my daughter couldn't even comprehend. And she threw it in the kitchen trash, amongst coffee grounds and potato peelings. That's what my late husband's sacrifice meant to her. Jump. Her words spat like poison just moments before. My own flesh and blood. The realization hit me not as a slow dawn, but as a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs right there in the quiet hallway. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was a cold, sickening certainty. I saw her again in my mind's eye, near his old mahogany desk earlier, that careless flick of her wrist while supposedly tidying. It wasn't tidying. It was disposal. My hand trembled as I reached for the desk drawer anyway, needing the visual confirmation. The small, dark velvet box was gone from its usual spot. Of course it was. And then another memory, sharp and insistent, Mark's voice years ago, low and serious, explaining a very specific clause in his will. A condition tied directly, irrevocably to honoring his memory. A condition my daughter, blinded by greed and disrespect, had just spectacularly, catastrophically failed to meet. She had no idea what she'd truly thrown away. But she was about to find out. Before Mark's illness stole him from me far too soon, life had a rhythm, a comfortable predictability built over 35 years of shared moments. As a woman suddenly navigating widowhood, the silence in our sturdy brick house wasn't just quiet. It felt hollow, echoing with the absence of his steady presence. Mark was my anchor. A former Marine, quiet about his 2 tours but radiating a calm strength forged in hardship. He rarely brought out his medals. The Purple Heart, the combat action ribbon, others nestled in that velvet box. But when he did, it wasn't for show. It was a quiet communion with his past, a reminder of the sacrifices that shaped the honorable man I loved. They weren't just metal. They were pieces of his history, his integrity. He kept them tucked away in his desk, symbols of a profound personal journey. Our daughter, Chloe, was in her late 20s when he passed. Mark had doted on her, perhaps shielded her too much from life's harder edges. She grew up bright and ambitious, but her ambition always seemed tethered to the next acquisition. The designer handbag, the trendy car, the lifestyle her friends flaunted. Mark and I tried to instill deeper values, principles beyond price tags, but it often felt like whispering against a hurricane of consumer culture. His death seemed to amplify this trait in her. Her grief, if she felt it beyond the disruption to her expectations, was quickly overshadowed by impatience, a restless energy focused not on mourning but on settling things. She lived nearby, so her visits were frequent initially. A shared grief, I'd thought. But the comfort soon curdled. Sorting through Mark's belongings became her primary focus. His study, my sanctuary, filled with his books, photos, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco clinging to the leather chair, was to Chloe merely an inventory list. Obstacles between her and the closing of the estate. She saw assets, not memories. The first truly jarring moment came about 6 months after the funeral. I was curled in Mark's armchair, holding a worn sweater, trying to feel him near. Chloe breezed in mid-call about brunch reservations, phone glued to her ear. She paused, scanned the room, and let out a sigh layered thick with irritation. "Mom, seriously," she said, momentarily covering the phone's mouthpiece. "When are we going to tackle all this stuff? It's just sitting here. Feels kind of morbid." Her gesture took in everything. His framed commendations, his bookshelf, the very chair I occupied. "Chloe, these aren't just stuff," I managed, my voice thick with unshed tears. "These are your father's things. His life." I know," she replied, rolling her eyes in that way that made my teeth clench. "But he's gone. We need to be practical. Besides," she added, dropping her voice conspiratorially, "some of this might be worth something. We should look into getting appraisals." Worth something. The words landed like stones in my stomach. Yes, his life, his memory was worth everything, but not in the way she measured it. The callousness was breathtaking. The utter failure to grasp the concept of sentimental value, of legacy, felt like a betrayal in itself. I tried weakly to explain. He just waved me off. "Hey Mom, whatever. Just tell me when you're ready to stop being so emotional about it." She returned to her brunch plans, her laughter echoing unnaturally in the quiet room, leaving me clutching the sweater, a cold dread seeping into the warmth of memory. A chasm was opening between us, wider and deeper than I had realized. That comment about practicality wasn't an isolated incident. It became the drumbeat of her visits. A relentless, nudging pressure to erase Mark's presence, to liquidate his past. "Don't you think the living room feels a bit dated with that huge bookcase, Mom?" she'd ask, glancing at the beautiful oak piece Mark had proudly built with his own hands. "Maybe something more modern? Lighter?" Or she'd pick up a framed photo. "Dad looks so young here." Then casually, "That old watch of his, it's probably not even working. Collectors pay good money for vintage pieces, you know. Think of the kitchen remodel you could do." Each suggestion felt like a deliberate prick designed to wear me down. I clung to patience, reasoning that grief manifested strangely. Maybe this focus on the tangible was her shield against the unbearable weight of loss. But a darker suspicion whispered otherwise. It felt less like coping, more like avarice barely veiled. Her questions about the will became more frequent, more pointed. Did Dad have everything properly updated? Is the lawyer handling it quickly? She tried to sound nonchalant, but the underlying urgency was unmistakable. Mark and I had always been transparent. Chloe knew she was provided for. But this felt different. Predatory. One Saturday she announced she was coming over to help me organize the study. Help me. I hesitated, the room still felt too sacred for her pragmatic approach. But maybe, I hoped, sifting through his things together might spark something in her. A flicker of connection to the father she seemed so eager to quantify. It was a foolish hope. The process was excruciating. Chloe moved through his belongings with the detached air of an auctioneer assessing lots. She picked up a photo of Mark receiving a commendation, his smile proud but humble. Wonder if this frame is silver, she mused, turning it over. She rummaged through a box of his field mementos, an old compass, dog tags, a service medal ribbon bar. Seriously, Mom? What's the point of keeping this stuff? It's just old. She dropped the compass back with a thud that echoed her disrespect. Chloe, please, I said, my voice strained. Those were important to him. They represent. Represent what? Being uncomfortable somewhere hot and sandy? She retorted, her tone bordering on contemptuous. Look, I appreciate the whole hero narrative, but practically speaking, this is clutter. Valuable house space clutter. My breath hitched. Hero narrative? Clutter? I tried again, desperately, to convey the meaning, the sacrifice, the history held in those objects. She wasn't listening. Her eyes scanned the bookshelves. Okay, fine, sentimental junk, whatever. But these books, she ran a manicured finger along a row of Mark's treasured first editions. These could be worth a packet. We absolutely need to get these valued. Properly. The conversation stalled, leaving me heartsick. Her world revolved around a single axis. Monetary worth. Her father's life, his service, his passions, all reduced to potential price tags. The dread intensified, settling deep in my bones. This wasn't just about sorting possessions anymore. It felt like an attempt to overwrite his memory with dollar signs. And I started to fear there was no line she wouldn't cross to get what she considered hers. The pressure didn't let up. It escalated. Chloe's subtle hints hardened into impatient demands. And she started bringing him. Her boyfriend, cut from the same cloth of slick surfaces and shallow values. He dressed expensively, talked loudly about his supposed business ventures, and surveyed our home, Mark's legacy, like a potential teardown project. Liam became Chloe's echo chamber, amplifying her disregard. Yes, Sarah, he'd say, lounging in Mark's armchair, making himself far too comfortable. Chloe's got the right idea. Clear out the old vibes, modernize. You could get a killing for some of this stuff. Imagine a state-of-the-art entertainment system in here. Their tag team approach felt suffocating, relentless. It came to a head one Tuesday evening. Chloe had invited herself and Liam for dinner. The meal was thick with tension, punctuated by their comments about downsizing investment properties and the slowness of estate settlements. Afterwards, Chloe followed me into the kitchen as I cleared the plates. Mom, we really need to talk, she began, her tone lacking any warmth. It's been over a year now. Dad wouldn't want you rattling around in this shrine. It's not a shrine, Chloe, it's our home, I replied, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary, my knuckles white. Fine. But it's crammed with his things, she insisted, her voice rising. Old clothes, dusty papers, those ridiculous medals. It's depressing. And frankly, it's inconvenient. Inconvenient? For what? I turned, finally meeting her hard gaze. For my life, she exclaimed, dropping all pretense. The inheritance. Liam and I have plans. A house deposit isn't going to magically appear. We need that money, Mom. Dad promised me. The raw greed was shocking, eclipsing any semblance of mourning or respect. It was just the money. Nothing else mattered. Your father wanted you to be comfortable, Chloe, I said, my voice trembling, a mixture of fury and deep disappointment churning inside me. But he valued other things more. Integrity. Respect. Concepts you seem determined to ignore. Oh, here we go, she scoffed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. Respecting a dusty box of metal bits? Get real, Mom. Nobody cares about that ancient history stuff anymore. It's junk. It belongs in the trash. Junk. Belongs in the trash. His medals. The physical proof of his courage, his pain, his survival. Trash? The words struck me with the force of a physical assault. Tears blurred my vision, hot and angry. Through them, I saw Liam leaning against the doorframe, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. Get out, I whispered, the words tight, dangerous. What did you say? Chloe blinked, genuinely surprised by my tone. I said get out, I repeated, my voice gaining strength, pointing a shaking finger towards the front door. Both of you. No. Chloe grabbed her purse, her face flushing with anger. Fine. Don't expect me to come running when you're all alone in your precious museum. Liam swaggered out after her without a word, the closing door sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. But her words lingered, venomous and terrifying. Junk. Belongs in the trash. Had she really? The thought was monstrous, but it lodged itself in my mind. She'd been near the desk. She'd taken the kitchen trash out just before the argument fully ignited, one of her performative acts of helpfulness. My feet carried me towards Mark's study on autopilot, dread a lead weight in my stomach. The top drawer of the mahogany desk slid open smoothly. The indentation where the velvet box always sat screamed its absence. Panic clawed at my throat. I searched frantically, pulling out other drawers, shuffling papers, scanning surfaces. Nothing. Gone. Junk. Belongs in the trash. Her voice. Her contempt. Her actions. It all coalesced into a single, unbearable truth. She hadn't just thought it. She had done it. My daughter. My Mark's daughter. Had thrown away his honor. Bow rose in my throat. Leaning against the desk for support, another memory surfaced, cutting through the horror. Mark's voice explaining the clause. The safeguard. The final lesson. I knew with chilling certainty what I had to do. The house felt alien after they left, the air thick with betrayal. The initial shockwave of anger receded, leaving behind the cold, hard certainty of what Chloe had done. Junk. Belongs in the trash. The phrase was a brand on my consciousness. Her casual movements near the desk earlier, dismissed at the time, now replayed with sinister clarity. I had to see. I needed the physical proof, the irrefutable evidence of her desecration. I walked towards the kitchen, each step heavy. The bin near the back door stood innocuously closed. Chloe had emptied it into the outside receptacle just before she stormed out. I remembered that distinctly now. Her final act of helpfulness. My hand shook as I lifted the lid of the larger outdoor bin. The stench of week-old refuse hit me, gagging me slightly. I peered in, scanning the mess of bags and discarded food containers under the dim porch light. And then I saw it. Near the top, caught on a ripped plastic bag, a corner of dark velvet. My breath hitched. Heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I reached into the filth, my fingers closing around the familiar shape of the small box. I pulled it out. Just like its vacant space in the drawer. Defiled but empty. But wait. My eyes scanned the surrounding garbage again, desperately. And there, tangled in slimy vegetable peelings, glinting faintly, metal. Purple ribbon. Bronze star. Ignoring the revulsion, I plunged my hand back into the reeking bin, fingers blindly searching, closing around the cold, sharp edge of the metal. I drew it out. Mark's purple heart, smeared with grime, stained with coffee grounds, lying amidst the refuse of our lives. Discarded. Third. A strangled sob tore from my throat, raw and agonizing. I collapsed onto my knees on the damp concrete beside the bin, clutching the metal so tightly its edges bit into my palm. The violation felt absolute. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a voiding of his sacrifice, a contemptuous dismissal of everything he endured. She hadn't just tossed out metal, she had tried to throw away his very soul. Kneeling there in the dark, surrounded by garbage, the fog of grief and shock finally burned away, leaving behind a core of ice-cold clarity. Mark had known. Years ago, drafting his will, he must have seen this potential in her. This terrifying emptiness where empathy and respect should have been. This worship of the material over the meaningful. I remembered that evening vividly now, after meeting with Mr. Henderson, our lawyer. Mark had taken my hands, his gaze serious. "Sarah," he'd said, his voice low. "There's a specific clause about Chloe in the will. A safeguard." He explained it then. Her substantial inheritance was conditional. It depended entirely on her demonstrating respect for his service, his memory, the symbols associated with it. He'd even specifically mentioned the metals. Any overt act of dishonor, any deliberate desecration, and she would forfeit everything. "Mark, that's incredibly harsh," I protested at the time. "She's our daughter. He loves you." "I know she does, Sarah, in her way," he'd replied with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "But her values, they worry me sometimes. I want her secure, but not if it means she tramples over everything that truly matters. Think of it as a final lesson. In honor." His words resonated now with chilling prescience. He hadn't wanted this outcome, but he had prepared for it. Chloe, consumed by her entitlement, had charged blindly into the very consequence he'd laid out. My tears stopped. The grief remained, a permanent ache, but now it was overlaid with steely resolve. This wasn't about revenge for me. This was about justice for Mark. This was about consequences mandated by him. Chloe had spat on his legacy. She would now face the repercussions he himself had decreed. Carefully, methodically, I retrieved the other medals I could find amidst the trash. The combat action ribbon, his good conduct medal. They were filthy, tarnished by her act, but they were tangible pieces of his honor, and I would restore them. I carried them inside, washed them gently at the kitchen sink, my movements precise and deliberate. As the grime washed away, so did any lingering hesitation. Tomorrow morning, my first call would be to Mr. Henderson. Mark's final lesson was about to commence. The phone call to Mr. Henderson felt both heavy and necessary. He was the family lawyer, a man who had known Mark for decades and understood his principles. I recounted the events of the previous evening, keeping my voice steady, detailing Chloe's escalating demands, her venomous outburst about the metals being junk, and the ultimate horror of finding them discarded in the outdoor trash bin. I emphasized that I found them myself moments after her departure, directly linking her actions to the desecration. Mr. Henderson listened in grave silence. "Ah, Sarah, I am so sorry you had to experience that," he said, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. He remembered the clause perfectly. Mark was very clear, very determined about that point, he confirmed. He felt it was a matter of fundamental respect. He paused, then asked gently, "Are you absolutely certain this is the course you wish to pursue? The ramifications for Chloe will be severe." "I am certain, Mr. Henderson," I replied, the image of the soiled purple heart searing itself into my mind. Mark's wishes were explicit. Chloe's actions were undeniable. She triggered the clause he put in place for this very reason. "This is not my decision. It's the consequence of hers." We scheduled a meeting for the following week at his office. Neutral territory. He advised me to tell Chloe it was simply a final review of the estate settlement details, giving no hint of the true purpose. He also strongly recommended a witness, someone who knew the family dynamics but could remain objective. Mark's younger sister Carol immediately came to mind. She revered her brother, shared our values, and had privately expressed concerns about Chloe's attitude. When I called her, Carol agreed without hesitation, her voice tight with sorrow but firm with support. Informing Chloe about the meeting was straightforward. Predictably, her tone was bright, laced with poorly concealed excitement. Finally, she chirped. Liam and I have our eye on the perfect starter home. This timing is amazing. Hearing her casual assumption, knowing the devastating truth that awaited her, sent a cold shiver down my spine. The day of the meeting dawned overcast and drizzly, mirroring my own somber mood. I chose a simple navy dress, wanting to project quiet dignity. Tucked securely in my handbag was the velvet box, the medals cleaned, restored, and resting inside. Carol met me in the lobby of Mr. Henderson's building, her supportive presence a quiet comfort. Her expression was grim but resolute. Chloe arrived moments later, Liam hovering possessively beside her. She wore a conspicuously expensive, brightly colored suit, radiating an air of triumphant expectation. "Morning, Carol." She greeted us with forced cheerfulness, her eyes already scanning the room for Mr. Henderson, eager to get to the main event, the payout. "So, ready to sign off on everything?" Mr. Henderson greeted us professionally and led us into the formal conference room. As Liam started to pull out a chair next to Chloe, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat politely but firmly. "Actually, Mr. O'Connell, this meeting concerns the direct beneficiaries named in Mr. Thompson's will. Perhaps you would be kind enough to wait in the reception area?" Liam blinked, looking momentarily indignant, then glanced at Chloe, who gave a tiny, irritated shake of her head. He shrugged, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features, and retreated, leaving the four of us in the suddenly very quiet room. Mr. Henderson began by outlining the standard procedures for finalizing an estate. He spoke calmly, professionally, laying the groundwork. Chloe shifted in her seat, tapping her foot impatiently, her attention clearly elsewhere, likely calculating figures in her head. Then Mr. Henderson paused, his gaze settling directly on Chloe. "Before we discuss the distribution of assets, Chloe," he stated, his voice steady and measured, "there is a crucial condition precedent attached to your inheritance in your father's will. A condition we must formally address now." Chloe looked up, her impatience momentarily replaced by a flicker of confusion. "A condition? What are you talking about?" I drew a steadying breath. This was the moment. "Mr. Henderson," I interjected, my voice clear and strong, "perhaps it would clarify matters if I first recounted the events of last Tuesday evening." I looked directly at Chloe, whose eyes widened almost imperceptibly. I calmly narrated the argument, quoting her dismissive words about Mark's service, her exact phrase, "junk. Belongs in the trash," spoken with such contempt regarding his medals. I then described finding the empty box in the desk and my subsequent discovery of the box itself, and the actual medals, the Purple Heart, the combat action ribbon, buried in the outdoor bin after she had taken out the trash. I placed the restored velvet box gently on the polished table between us. I retrieved them. Naturally, I finished quietly. Chloe's face drained of color, then flushed a furious, blotchy red. That's not true," she stammered, her eyes darting frantically between the three of us. I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. But I would never. "Mom, how can you sit there and lie like that?" Carol shifted uncomfortably but met Chloe's gaze with unwavering disappointment. Mr. Henderson raised a hand, cutting off Chloe's escalating denial. "Chloe, your mother informed me of these events immediately after they occurred. While profoundly distressing, the determining factor lies within the legal instrument of the will itself." He picked up the bound document, turning to a specific page marked with a tab. "Article 7, Section B. Please listen carefully." He adjusted his reading glasses. He read slowly, each word landing with deliberate weight in the silent room. "My bequest to my daughter, Chloe N. Thompson, is made with the deepest paternal love, but it is also contingent upon the explicit condition that she consistently demonstrates respect for my life service to my country and the core values I endeavored to instill. Specifically, should she, by any deliberate action or statement, overtly dishonor my military service, my memory, or the tangible symbols thereof, including, but not limited to, my service medals, in a manner deemed grossly disrespectful by my appointed executor, Then her entire designated inheritance, as detailed in Article 4 of this will, shall be rendered null and void and immediately forfeit. The silence that followed was absolute, thick and heavy. Chloe stared dumbfounded at Mr. Henderson, her mouth slightly agape. Understanding flickered in her eyes, rapidly replaced by dawning horror, then sheer, unadulterated panic. Forfeit? She whispered, the word barely audible. What do you mean forfeit? Oh, Dad he wouldn't do that to me. He did, Chloe, Mr. Henderson replied, his tone quiet but utterly firm. He included this provision with great forethought. And based on the events as credibly described by your mother, events which constitute a direct and profound violation of the very conditions Mark laid out, I, as executor, have no alternative but to enforce the terms of this will. Your actions have irrevocably triggered this forfeiture clause. Oh. Chloe surged to her feet, her chair scraping violently against the polished floor. This is ridiculous. Mom manipulated you. She's poisoning you against me to keep the money for herself. She rounded on me, her face contorted, tears of fury, not sorrow, beginning to stream down her cheeks. How could you do this to me? It was just a stupid fight. Just some old pieces of metal. They were never just pieces of metal to your father, Chloe, I said, my own voice thick with a sadness that now overshadowed the anger. And clearly, the principle of honoring his sacrifice meant more to him than leaving you money unconditionally. He gave you a choice embedded in his final wishes. You made your choice when you treated his honor like garbage. But, the house deposit. She choked out, gesturing wildly. Liam, our future. You can't just take it away. I am taking nothing, Chloe, I responded softly, meeting her desperate gaze. Your father put this consequence in place. Your own actions activated it. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, bringing the focus back to the legal reality. The will is precise, legally binding, and leaves no room for interpretation, Chloe. The forfeiture is absolute. He then proceeded to explain Mark's contingency plan. The substantial sum Chloe would have inherited was now redirected. A large portion would go immediately to a national veterans support charity Mark had long admired, an organization providing critical aid to wounded service members and their families. The remaining portion reverted to the residual estate, under my stewardship as the primary beneficiary. Chloe stood frozen, trembling, her eyes fixed on the velvet box sitting innocently on the table. The full weight of reality seemed to crash down on her. The future she'd banked on, the money she'd prioritized above all else, the inheritance she'd desecrated her own father's memory to secure, was gone. Vanished. Because of her. The sense of justice settling in the room was profound, not triumphant but deeply, somberly final. Mark's honor, represented by those rescued medals, had prevailed. The explosion was immediate and messy. Chloe emitted a raw shriek, a sound less of grief and more of thwarted entitlement. She spun around, flung open the conference room door, and nearly bowled over Liam, who was quite obviously lurking just outside, ear practically pressed to the wood. He did it. She screamed, pointing a shaking finger back towards me, her face streaked with tears and running mascara. That vindictive old woman and her precious, worthless medals. She cut me off. Everything. Liam's jaw went slack. His eyes, usually filled with smug confidence, darted from Chloe's unraveling state to me, then to Mr. Henderson, the mental gears visibly grinding as he processed the sudden evaporation of his expected windfall. He muttered something incoherent under his breath. It sounded suspiciously like a curse, grabbed Chloe's arm with surprising roughness, and hauled her away down the corridor, her frustrated sobs echoing behind them. In the heavy silence that followed, Carol reached across the table, her hand covering mine. You upheld Mark's wishes, Sarah, she said quietly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and respect. I think he would be at peace knowing his principles were honored. Even like this. Mr. Henderson efficiently handled the remaining paperwork. The transfer to the Veterans Charity was initiated that same day. Knowing that Chloe's greed and disrespect were inadvertently funding something Mark believed in so deeply brought a complex sense of satisfaction, turning a negative into a positive, honoring his legacy in a tangible way. The remaining estate was secured, ensuring my future, but the money itself felt almost irrelevant compared to the moral victory. Over the next few weeks, Chloe, likely egged on by a rapidly cooling Liam, made a few desperate, clumsy attempts to contest the will. Mr. Henderson fielded the calls from her hastily hired and likely soon unpaid lawyer, calmly reiterating the undeniable clarity of Article 7, Section B. The attempts quickly fizzled out. There were also tearful voicemails left on my phone, manipulative texts pleading misunderstanding and blaming grief, even one awkward encounter at the grocery store where she tried to apologize, not for desecrating the metals, but for the argument for the consequences. There was no glimmer of genuine remorse in her eyes, only the frantic desperation of someone who had lost a winning lottery ticket. I remained polite but distant. The line had been crossed, burned, and salted. Our relationship is, for all intents and purposes, over. That's a heavy burden for a mother to carry. But I've come to realize I'm mourning the daughter I thought I had, the daughter Mark and I tried to raise, not the person who revealed her true self so devastatingly. Life is quieter now. The house feels larger, filled sometimes by silence, but also by a renewed sense of Mark's presence. Not as a ghost, but as a guiding principle. His study is my refuge. His books remain, his photos watch over me, and centered on his desk, under a protective glass dome I purchased, sit his medals. Cleaned, cherished, gleaming quietly. They are constant reminders of his courage, yes, but also of the enduring importance of honor, respect, and memory. Sometimes, in the evenings, I sit in his worn leather chair, the faint scent of pipe tobacco still clinging to it, and I look at those medals. I tell Mark about my day, the small victories in the garden, the thank you letter I received from the veterans charity his legacy now supports. I tell him how much I miss his steadiness, his quiet wisdom. And I tell him I kept my word. I protected his honor. It was a brutal lesson learned at immense personal cost. It taught me that love sometimes requires enforcing difficult truths, and that real value transcends the material. Chloe forfeited an inheritance, a fortune she desperately craved. But in doing so, she lost something infinitely more precious: her connection to her father's legacy, her own integrity. I lost the daughter I knew, but I reaffirmed my bond with my husband's values and found a quiet strength in upholding them. Mark's memory is safe now. His honor finally rests in peace, undisturbed. And in that I find my own peace too.